is correct, A on very top. Versus here, this is probably the least amount of carbon-14 because it's been a really long time. Okay, another evidence we have is plate tectonics. If you look in your GPS satellite right now, it can probably tell you how fast these plate tectonics are moving away from each other. And if you were to go in your computer, maybe create a model where you kind of go backward in time, then you're able to see, how long it took for them to be this far apart. And maybe there was a time that when it was just a single joined land here. You will notice that on, are you ready for this chapter? I gave you these words, Pangaea, Laurasia, and Gondwana. I want you guys to know these names. So Pangaea is when the continents, they were all joined into one supercontinent, and it no longer exists, and it was around 280 million years ago. So the theory of plate tectonics is that Earth's surface consists of several rigid layers called tectonic plates. I hope you guys already know that the center of the Earth is molten lava. It's not solid like the moon or Venus. So there are no plate tectonics in the moon or Venus because it's solid, whereas Earth has the molten lava. So they move in response to forces acting deep within the planet. So think of this land as maybe ice sheet that's kind of moving apart or moving away from each other. Earthquakes and volcanoes are evidence that Earth's plate continue to move today. So first it was a single landmass here. Then it started moving away from each other. Now we had two, Laurasia and Gondwana, and then we had a lot more. So present day continents form begin to drift apart, and today continents are still drifting apart. If you go to Australia there and you visit their botanical garden there, they're going to be talking about this a lot. Oh, Pangaea, Laurasia, Gondwana, they're going to mention this a lot. So what happened with this plate tectonics? Maybe there were some species or some organisms that existed here. And now when it drifted apart, some of them were left here and some of them were left here, maybe animal species. And if you guys remember last time I said, if there are two populations that are not mixing, they start diverging into different direction. So they might evolve in different direction, they might evolve in different direction, and then eventually they become different species. So that's what can happen with the plate tectonics. Supposed to play. This is going to show you how it started drifting apart. 65 million years ago. That's today. So they were one, and then they just started drifting apart like that. So you had Pangaea, then Laurasia, Gondwana, and then we have different names here. So this is showing you that fossils help geographers piece together Earth's continent into Pangaea. So this is showing different populations. So maybe there was a population of reptiles that lived in Africa, and then some of them, got when the drift happened or the continents moved away, some of them were in India, and then some of them were in Antarctica. Even if they don't exist today, they maybe found fossils of them there. So that gives them evidence that they were all together at one point. And then this population in India versus in Africa, they can diverge into different directions, and they can become different species, maybe through mutations or different alleles that are being favored. So it can be animal populations or plant populations. So depending on the fossils they might find, they can say that they were, these species existed on this landmass. There's something called a hypothetical line of Wallace. So what this is showing the hypothetical line. West of this line, the species that exist are tigers, rhinos, elephants, and some other ones here. And then towards the east of the line, there are different species. So maybe they were all, they came from maybe a same ancestor. And because they're living in different environments, they diverge into different species. So these geographic studies, they give us a little bit more evidence for the evolutionary events. So animals on either side of Wallace line have been separated for millions of years, evolving independently. So they could have been coming from a single ancestor, but because they've been evolving differently, they became maybe different species. So you get different variety of the species on one side compared to the other side, depending on the type of environment that's there or the way they're evolving. So I want to stop and ask if there are any questions here. I'm going to move on to another topic now. It's a little bit heavy, so I want to stop and see if there are any questions here. No? Is it making sense so far? Give me thumbs up if it's making sense. Yes, okay. So these chapters, Unit 3, it's a little bit more of a theory than you know, doing equations or learning the processes for transcription translation. So it's a little bit easier. But you can still stop me if you have more questions. So this topic I mentioned, that's a little bit heavier. If we were in the lab, I would be giving you models for this topic. That's why we are meeting for the lab today. I took pictures of the models. I'm going to show you those. So we will talk about this topic in the lab as well. Okay, so another thing, so we talked about fossils, we talked about plate tectonics. Next thing we're going to talk about is anatomy. So scientists, they look for anatomical features to determine the evolutionary relationship of the organism. In this picture, we're looking at the bones of the arm and the forearm. So they're color coded in different organisms. You have a hawk here, bat, seal, tiger, and then human. So this is called femur. So it's color coded blue in all these different animals. People who have to take anatomy, you guys have to, you know, learn femur and the forearm, radial, ulna, your carpal bones, your phalanges. So you have to learn all different names. So when they're comparing these bones in different animals, they have the same bones. And if someone were to say that God created everybody differently, maybe all these animals existed and the God created humans from Adam or Eve, then why do we have the same bone structure? So they're looking at the bone structure. It might have a different function. It's used for maybe flying here in the hawk and for different functions, but it still had the same structure, means it came from the same ancestor. So that's what we're going to talk about next. This is called homologous. You have heard the word homologous before. It means the same. Two structures are homologous. You heard this when we talked about chromosomes. So two structures are homologous if the similarities between them reflect common ancestry. They're homologous means if they have a common ancestor that had that structure, now the species have that structure, that means it came from one single ancestor, that means they're homologous. All these animals have same bones in their forelimbs. That shows homology. I want you to memorize this, homologous or homology, and it's really important that you understand this because we're gonna go ahead and talk about the opposite. That's called analogy or analogous. So this is homologous. Homologous means the structures are coming from one single ancestor. They had a common ancestor, common ancestry for that structure. That's homology or homologous. In this picture, here is the here are the bones that we're looking at, and there is this one bone that's color coded. That means they're showing example of one bone that's the same. So it's in horse is used for running, and bat is used for flying. Dolphins becomes the flipper, and it's color coded. It's the same bone that's existing in all these different animals. So these similarities suggest that their common ancestor had this bone configuration. So it started with the original ancestor and then depending on the function or the environment, they develop differently in each animal. So here again, so you can see these different bones, they're color coded. So here for humans, we have these fingers or phalanges, anatomical term is phalanges or digits. We use this for gripping. So in horse hoof here, it's fused together. It's not all separate, because if it was all separate, it wouldn't be efficient for running and it might break. So here's fused together, is better for running. And dolphin turned into a flipper, got a little bit thicker compared to here, but turned into a flipper. Here in bats, it got really thin and it's used for webbing, holding this webbing together. So it's serving different function on each of these, but it's still the similar structure. So homologous structures need not have the same function, or they don't look alike, but the ancestor is the same. So the structure is the same, but depending on the environmental selective pressure that each animal is in, or the evolutionary line, have led to small changes in their ancestors' bone structure. So if there are some changes, small changes, that's happening because of the environment. Depending on the environment they're living in, due to the environmental pressure, if they want to survive, they might have to, they might have developed some changes in those structures. So that's homology. Any questions on homologous structures? No? Okay, I mentioned the vestigial structure before when we talked about appendix in humans, and I said it serves no function, but it's maybe the gene is on the same chromosomes, it's left over, and it is it's there because it's on the same chromosome or something like that, but it doesn't serve any function. So that's the vestigial structure. Vestigial structure, you can define it as it has lost the function, but is homologous to a functional structure in other species. So what does that mean? So here, and this is an example of a whale ancestor. You can see the whale ancestor had arms and limbs. Modern whale, these arms turned into flippers, but there are some still leftover bones for the limbs. They don't use the limbs anymore, but there are still some bone structures that are left over from that. So again, going back to the question, if God created everybody perfectly, why are there these bones left over? So that's what the scientists might argue to give the evidence of evolution. Another one is, I think, snake legs. Let's see. So here you can see these nubbings for the snake. These are also vestigial structures. They are left over. Let me see if there's a bony structure that's given. So here you can still see the vestigial leftover structures for the legs. They have no function, but they're still there. So that's a vestigial structure that has lost the function, but it's still there. So vestigial hind limbs in some snake species and pelvises in whales are evidence of these organisms' ancestors. So the ancestors had those. So these are the pelvises or the pelvic bones. But you see the vestigial hind limb, even though it has no function, it's still sticking around. So homology versus analogy. We looked at homology. We compared the bat wing bones with the human arm. Here's another mouse forelimb. They have same structure, but they might have different function. That's homology. Anatomical structures are analogous if they are superficially similar. They look the same, similar, but they didn't derive from a common ancestor. So this bat wing, butterfly wing, bird wing, maybe they use for flying, but they don't have these because their ancestor had that. It didn't come from a common ancestry. Maybe it came from environmental pressure where they needed the wings to fly or to survive, but they didn't come from a common ancestor, whereas this came from a common ancestor. That's called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution.